We are starting tonight Perek Gimel, and we're going to read the first few psukim of Perek Gimel. Vayashkem Yehoshua baboiker, vayisu mehashitim vayavoyu ad hayarden, hu v'chol bnei Yisrael, vayolinu shom terem ya'avoiru. Vayi miktzei shloishes yomim v'vayavoiru hashoitrim bekerev hamachane, vayetzavu esoom le'emoyer. כי ראיסכם אסרוים בריס השם אלוהיכם, והכהנים הלוויים נויסים אויסוי, ואתם תיסעו ממקומכם והלכתם אחריו. אך רוחוי יהיה ביניכם וביניו, כ2,000 אמו במידו, אל תקרבו אליו, למען אשר תדעו את הדרך אשר תלכו בו, כי לא עברתם בדרך מתמויל שלשם. So let's give you a little bit of background of where we're holding. We're holding over here, as we already read in the previous psukim, in Tes Nisan, Beis Alofim Tov Peiches. The Nehar HaYarden, just to give you a geographical description, starts from the Yam Kineres, it's called Neter Yam Kineres, in the north, all the way down to Yam HaMelach, in the south, where Yericho is basically almost in the most southern part of the Yarden, just a few, we'll say 2 to 3 miles north of the Kav Hadroimi of the Yarden. Klal Yisrael are sitting in the eastern bank of the Jordan River, and Machane Yisrael had at the time, it's Machlekes in the Tosefta, what was exactly the minyan at the time of crossing the Yarden, on or about 2.5 million nefoshes, anoshim, noshim, v'taf, whereas the last Masa, which state in Parshas Maseh, all the Masois, was the 41st Masa, where they're right now sitting in Arvois, Moyov, Al Yarden, Yericho. They have to cross the Jordan River, and the width of Machane Yisrael took approximately, according to shiurim of the Chazanish, 1.6 miles was the width of Machane Yisrael, where the Kotze Hadroimi of the Machane was called a place called Beis HaYeshimois, and the northern part of the Machane Yisrael is the Ovel Hashitim. So Klal Yisrael is sitting on the eastern bank of the Jordan River, about to cross the Yarden, which wasn't that wide, we spoke about it several times, in a machane which is approximately 1.6 mile, crossing over between Beis HaYeshimois and Ovel Hashitim. Vayavoyu ad Yarden, they're coming on the 9th of Nisan, the 40th year, they're coming in the 9th of Nisan, das kann man sich nicht dingen, because the Psukim Mefuroshim soon that the actual crossing of the Yarden was in Yud, in the 10th day of Nisan, and they go to sleep, Lonim Balaylo Vayavoyu ad Yarden, they go to sleep, Leil Asiri Benisan. Vayim Mikzeis Shloishes Yomim, this was the Shiluach HaMeraglim, we spoke about it. We're holding now on the 10th of Nisan, Vayavru HaShoitrim bekerev hamachane, the police people appointed by Yeshua bin Nun, Vayetzav esoom le'emoyer, ki ro'ischem aroim bris Hashem Elokeichem, when you see the oren, ve'atem tisu mimkoimchem, let los mach platz, ve'olachtem acharov. Okay, we'll soon see Rashi. Rashi says, Lamaisa, there were 2 aroinas, was aroin shel Shechine and aroin shel Yosef. We remember Yosef gave them a tzivui, Pokoi difkoi delukim eschem v'alisim es atzmois amizei yitchem, and Moshe Rabbeinu carried Chacham Levikach mitzvahs throughout the Midbar all the way to Arvas Moyev. Moshe dies, and the Oren remains with Yeshua bin Nun, who crosses over the Yarden with Aroin shel Yosef and Aroin Shechine together. Okay. They cross the Yarden, they come to Gilgal, they build a Mishkan in the Gilgal, they're there for 14 years. Thereafter, they go to Shiloh, the Mishkan moves to Shiloh, We know that 369 years. They come to Noiv and Giva, and they're there for 57 years. And there's a short tkufa we're going to see today. It's important. The reason why I'm saying again this cheshbon, because there's a certain tkufa. The Orain itself was in Kiryas Yehorim. There was a Nishbali, they Plishtim was in Kiryas Yehorim. And then Shlomo HaMelech builds the Beis HaMikdash Yerushalayim. From the going into Eretz Yisrael today until building the Beis HaMikdash Harishon by Shlomo, it's a tkufa which is discussed in Sefer Yehoshua and Sefer Shoftim. It's 440 years. Shteit Vayi B'Shmoin Arbamois V'Shmoin Shana B'Tzeis Bnei Yisrael Mitzrayim. We just graduated the 40 years of Midbar. We're going into Eretz Yisrael, and from here on, there's 440 years until the first Beis HaMikdash Harishon is built. Zogt Rashi, Ve'atem tisu mimkoimchem ve'alachtem acharov. Zogt Rashi, nishtane amase hazeh mish'ar masois. שכל זמן שמוישה יוקאיו מויו עמוד אונו נושא התחילה ומראה להם הדרך והאורין נושא אחר בייס דגולים. עכשיו האורין נושא התחילה. I'd like to be masber, should have a clearer picture. In Parshas Ba'aloischa, the Torah describes very clearly and precisely the Seder HaMasois and the Seder of how the Shvatim were structured, moving throughout from Yitzias Mitzrayim till coming into Eretz Yisrael. According to the description, they were split to 4 different groups of 3 Shvatim each, to Arba Ruchois HaShamayim, whereby Shevet Levi, Menashe and Ephraim is 2 Shvatim, so we have really 13 Shvatim. Shevet Levi is in the middle. There are in each side, it's very important, there are 3 Shvatim. One of them is the center one, and mitzdodov of the center one, there's 2 other subordinated shvatim. Mizrach, Ma'arev, Tzafon, Dorim. Inside Mizrach was Shevet Yehuda, and together with Yehuda is Yisachar and Zvulun. That's Mitzad Mizrach. If we look now as a box, and we look on the right side Mizrach, north is Tzafon. So Yehuda sits in the middle, Yisachar and Zvulun to the right or to the left of Yehuda. If we go down, we go clockwise. If we go down to Tzad Dorim, sits Shevet Reuven in the south, he's the center, and to the right of him and to the left of him is Shimon and Gad. If we move to Ma'arev, again clockwise going up, in Tzad Ma'arev sits Ephraim, and on his 2 sides is Menashe to his right and Binyamin to his left. In Tzad Tzafon, in the north of the Machane Yisrael, is Shevet Don, who is the center, and together with him is Asher and Naphtali to his right and to his left. So this is how the 4 boxes of 3 Shvatim each. In the middle of the Arba Ruchos was Shevet Machane Levi. The Kohanim were together. The Kohanim were on the right side, on the Tzad Mizrachi of the middle. If we take right now a box inside a wider box. So on the right side, on Tzad Mizrach, the Kohanim were close to Shevet Yehuda. That's the Kohanim. The Levim, we have Gershon, Kehos, and Merori. Bnei Kehos are sitting in the south, Somuch to Shevet Reuven. Bnei Gershon are sitting to the left, next to Ephraim. Bnei Merori are sitting up front in next to Machane Dan. In the middle of those 4 Shvatim, in other words, the Kohanim and Gershon, Kehas, and Merori of the Levim, is the Machane Shechine, where Oyel Moed is. So Oyel Moed is the center. Around it is the Kohanim and the Levim, and around it is Machane Yisrael, which is divided to 4 different groups. Bnei Kehos, we know that Levi had 3 sons, Gershon, Kehos, and Merori. They were responsible on Nesias Ha'orein. Steht in Posuk in the Torah Befeush, Ulibnei Kehos leinosan, ki avodas hakodesh aleim bakosef isou, and they were sitting in the south side of Machane Levio, Somuch to Bnei Reuven. Now, I just wanted to say, it's very important to know, that this structure of the Shvatim was not only when they were parked, but this is how they traveled. The traveling was done in such a format as described above. Zogt Rashi, now let's get back to our Rashi, that the Seder Ha'alicha in the Midbar was different than what right now we're experiencing going into Eretz Yisrael. Not kederech halichosom b'midbar. What happened by halichosom b'midbar? The Amud Ha'onon was lifnei ha'machane, and the Orain was in the middle, as we said, in the middle of the Kehuna and the Leviah was the Orain where Machne Shechina was. And here is the Seder changed. Take the Orain out of Machane Shechina, out of the middle, and put him up front, not with the Amud Ha'onon, but put him up front, and the Orain is going to be leading the way to go to Eretz Yisrael. Which Orain are we talking about? Okay, so if I look in Parshas Ba'alo Yisro, after it says all the Masois, and when the Torah describes that the Orain is take be'emtza be'acharei beis Golim, underneath the two Golim, it says in the Pasuk, Vayisu me'ar Hashem derech shloishes yomim, ve'aroim bris Hashem noisei lifneim, derech shloishes yomim losu lohem menucho. We know that the Orain, the Torah says beferish, that the Orain is be'emtza machane. Says Rashi, ve'orain bris Hashem noisei lifneim derech shloishes yomim, ze ha'orain hayoytze imoyem lemilchamo, ובוי שברי לוחס מונחים, ומקדים לפניהם דרך שלושת ימים, לסכן להם מקום חניה. So Rashi, don't be misled and mistaken. This Orain that's going lifneim shloishes yomim losu, looking for parking for the next mokum chanoya, we're not talking about the Orain ha'orain, but the Orain of Shivrei Luchas. And I would like to explain what does it mean. If you look in Parshas Eikev, you see the psukim shtei bo'esei yomar Hashem elai psol lecho shnei luchas avonim karishayim ve'olei elai or ve'osisa lecho Orain eitz ve'echtov al luchas hadvorim asher oyu al luchas harishayim asher shibarto ve'samtum be'Orain va'as Orain atzeishitim ve'efsol shnei luchas avonim karishayim ve'al or shnei luchas beyod ve'ichtov al luchas kamichtov harishin saseres hadvorim asher diber lahem bahar mitoich ho'esh beyoyim hakol Va'efen va'ered min ha'or va'osim esaluchas ba'aroin asher osisi va'yishom kasher tzivani Hashem. Zokt Rashi, that this Orain that Moshe made right here is not the Orain she'osu b'tzalel. This is the Orain which is Aroin Eitz. This is Shitas Rashi. We're going with Shitas Rashi. It was Aroin Eitz which was different than the Aroin of Betzalel. The Aroin of Betzalel was Atzeishitim was metzupe zov milfnim mibayis u'mechutz tetzapenu. And this Orain, Zokt Rashi, what do you need an extra Orain? V'zeu shoyoytze imohem lemilchama. Ve'oisa she'osa betzalel lo yoytze lemilchama elo b'mei elin v'nen shu'ola v'nishbo. In other words, on a regular terms, not b'mei elin, which was a chet, what they did wrong, the Orain she'osa Moshe, in order to store the luches, that was oilech lifneim. In other words, there were two Orainis. There was one Orain of Osa Betzalel from Zov, which was in the vein in Machne Shechina acharei beis Golim, and there's additional second Orain, which is an Orain of Eitz, which had the luchas, the Shivrei Luchas was in that Orain, and that Orain was going losu lohem menucha. Now, if you look in the Psukim in the Torah, it says there were 42 Masois. But if you count the Masois, there's really only 41 Masois. Zog de Goyen, that the 42nd Masa is this Masa we're reading about right here, when Klal Yisrael crosses the Yarden. Okay? So normally, the Orain Sheholach Lifneim, which is the Orain Eitz that Moshe made, where the Shivrei Luchas were them, was he should be the one to be in front of the Machane to find Mokum Chanoya, like all the other 41 Masoyas where they went, where the Orain Zov was in the middle, in Machne Shechina, Achrei Shnei Golim, and the Orain of Shivrei Luchas went in the front. Zokt Rashi, no. Nishtane masa ze mishar masois. Here, the Orein of Betzalel, that Bederech Klal was situated in the middle of Machnishchine, sufficient all the Shvotim, surrounded by the Kohanim and the Levim. Here, they took the Machplatz, and this Orein, which was normally Be'emtza HaMachane, is going to be leading the way to go to Eretz Yisrael. The reason for that being, steht in Goyen, because the tafkid of the Orein with the Shiver Luchas, the Orein Shel Eitz She'osa Moshe, was to find parking. He was the GPS to find Losur Lohem Mekoim Chanayu. But here is the Letzte Masa. Here is the Masa Achrim, because after coming to Eretz Yisrael, is Posku Amasois. Whatever dinim there were in the Masois, even though while they were in Eretz Yisrael, they were still going and conquering, but the Masois of going to Eretz Yisrael are going to be concluded tomorrow afternoon. We're holding Tes Nisan, here is Beretzivui. But tomorrow, as they cross in the morning the Yarden, as soon as they come to Yarden Yericho on the western bank of the Jordan River, so Tzach Yikoncha, Tzach Yendik is finished the whole parsha of Masois. So therefore, they don't need any more parking space. Welcome to Eretz Yisrael. And therefore, Davka the Orein Shel Zov She'osa Betzalel, he was the one, the Orein, which was leading the Maseh Ha'achlein of crossing the Yarden. Okay. Let's read Pasuk Gimel and Pasuk Dalet. Vayehi miktzei shleishes yomim, vayavru hashotim bekerev hamachane, vayetzav esoom le'moir kir'oischem esaroim bris Hashem Elokeichem, va'kohanim alevim noisim oisoi, ve'atem tisu mimekoimchem, ve'alachtem acharov. Okay? It says, ach rochoi ki, you should keep away, beinechem u'beinov k'alpayim abba b'mid artikev u'elov, leman teid'u es haderech asher telchu bo ki lo avartem b'derech mitol shilshel. So Rashi says that this Orein she'osa Betzalel is going to lead the way. The merchek should be alpayim amo. Zogt Rashi kedei shetelchu tiyu yocholim leilech v'lispalel lefonov b'Shabbos lefi sheyodo she'asidim liyo tzorim lefnei Yericho b'Shabbos. So we know that the Orein has to be in the front in order for Klal Yisrael, when they come in, and soon, Mamish, in a week, the next Shabbos is going to be a time where they're going to conquer Yericho. So you have to be Tzorim al Yericho b'Shabbos. So you want to be Mispalo, that means you have to keep away 2,000 Ames, not to go Mechutz L'Tchum, and that's the distance you're keeping from the Orein Shel Zov. Okay? If I look in Perek Vov, in Milchemes Yericho, state, I'm reading, Vayikro Yehoshua binun el hakoyanim, vayomer aleim se'u es haroin abris, v'shiva koyanim yis'u shiva sheiforis yoivlim lifnei Orein Hashem. Here in the Pasuk, it says who carries the Orein, crossing the Yarden. It says ambiguous loshon, akoyanim alavim. We don't know, we'll see in a minute. What is this koyanim levim? Is it koyanim or levim? In going into Perek Vov later by the capturing of Yericho, Vayikro Yehoshua ben Nun el hakohanim, doesn't say a word about Levim. Vayomer se'u es haroin abris. Right now, they're going to surround 7 times Yericho. There were 7 kohanim who took shofars and they blew. Lifnei haroin bris Hashem, but who is carrying the Orein surrounding Yericho a week later after going into Eretz Yisrael? Do steht, Vayomer Yehoshua Vayikro Yehoshua ben Nun el hakohanim. If I look in the Achnasa from the Orein, in 440 years from now, after the Mishkan in Gilgal, after the Mishkan in Shiloh, after the Mishkan in Noiv, after the Mishkan in Givoin, after the Orein was in Golus, in Kiryas Yearim, when they finally bring the Orein to park, a final long-term parking base, Hamikdash HaRishon, I'm reading the Pasuk in Sefer Melachim, Vayavoyu kol ziknei Yisrael, vayisoy hakohanim es ha'orein, vayalu es haroin Hashem ve'es oil moed ve'el kol klei hakodesh, asher ba'oyel, vayalu oisom hakohanim ve'alavim. Here the pasuk again starts with kohanim, specifying that the Oren was carried by the Kohanim. Vayalu Saroim Bris Hashem, Veskol Klei HaKodesh. It's not only the Oren, these other Klei HaKodesh. Vayalu Oisom HaKohanim VaLevim, says the Radak. Why at the beginning it says Kohanim, and at the end it says Kohanim Levim? He says because the beginning of the pasuk is talking about the Nesias Oren, and the Nesias Oren was done strictly but and only by Kohanim. The end of the pasuk is talking about Kol Klei HaKodesh, which is the Shulchan, the Menorah, the Mizbeach, all the Kier, the Kana, the whole Alle Kelim from Beis Hamikdash. Here already, the ones who carry were not only Kohanim, it says Kohanim VaLevim, not only Kohanim, but Kohanim and Levim. I would like to explain as follows. Shevet Levi, let's go back to Shevet Levi. Levi had 3 sons, Gershon, Kehos, Umerori. Okay? All of them had jobs in the Mishkan. Kehos had 4 sons. He has Amram, we know that's the father of Moshe and Aaron. And he had Yitzhar, Chevron, and Uziel. Those are the 4 sons that Kehos has. Okay? Amram, we know, has Aaron, Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam. Miriam is not Negeah, but he has 2 sons, Moshe and Aaron. Maybe he had more sons, but it's not the topic right now. 2 sons, Moshe and Aaron. Yitzhar had 3 sons, Koirach, Nefeg, and Zichri. Those are the 3 sons. Steht in Torah als. Chevron had 4 sons, and it doesn't mention in the Torah the names of the sons, but Divrei Yomim steht, Yeriyo, Amario, Yechiziel, and Yokneam. Those are the 4 sons of Chevron. And Uziel, steht here in Torah, had 3 sons, Elitzophan, Mishoel, and Sisri. Okay? Elitzophan ben Uziel, we know him, though this is Elitzophan ben Uziel, he is the son of Uziel, who is a brother of Kehos. So Bam is Koirach, as we know, Koirach from Parshas Koirach. Koirach was the first cousin to Moshe and Aaron, the first cousin to Elitzophan, whereby the fathers were brothers. Every single one of Levi's descendants had a job in Beis Hamikdash. This is, I just read you the Tzetzoim of Kehos. Bnei Merori got the job, as it stated in the Parsha, in Parshas Bamidbar Nasa, we just read. They got the job of Nesiah of Karshei HaMishkan. That's Bnei Merori. Bnei Gershon were noised the Urias of the Mishkan. Bnei Kehos carried the Klei HaMishkan. So we have 3 sons. Because Baruch Hu says, I'm taking the Mishkan and I'm separating to 3 separate sons, all sons of Levi. Merori gets the Karshei HaMishkan, Karshei HaMishkan, Brichov, Amudov, Adonov, all the structure of Pesach of the Mishkan. Bnei Gershon get the Urias, which is the oil on top, the Urias on the Tzdodim and the Urias on top. Bnei Kehos get not the structure, not the actual Mishkan, but they get the Klei HaMishkan. The Kehuna is given only to Aharon, who is a son of Amram, who is a son of Kehas. To him and to his children. So remember, everybody is Tzetzoim of Levi. And Kehos himself has also other sons. You see Koirach, you see Elitzophan. Those are all kinder einiklach of Kehos. From Gershon and Merori, they have their own jobs. One of them carries the crushing, one of them carries the Urias. The Klei HaMishkan is given to Bnei Kehos, okay, which is all of them. Bnei Kehos inclusive but not limited, Koirach and his family, and Elitzophan and his family. The Aaron, the tafkid of the Kehuna, is given only to, even not to Moshe. Moshe was Mekayin, there was a Kohen, there was Kohen Gadol, Yishmeis Me'amiluim, but for lifetime, Moshe Rabbeinu was a Levi. Aaron is the only son of Amram, who is the son of Kehos, who gets the job of Kehuna. So the old Shevet Levi, the old Tzetzoim, so in the Nesias HaMishkan itself, was given to the 2 brothers, Gershon and Merori. Kehos gets the Klei HaMishkan, In the Klei Mishkan itself, he gets all of his children, which means Korach is Noisei Mishkan, and Elitzofon, and Mishoel, and Sisri, all of them were Noisei Mishkan. The one who is a Kohen, who is Makiv, all the Korbanos is the Kohen Gadol, is Aaron Ubanov Adoilam. That was really the Taina of Levi, of Korach. We all call Eder Kulam Kedoshim, right? And why you want to be a Kohen and we are only the one who are Levim, Noisei Mishkan Vekelov. If I look in Parashat Bamidbar, it said, Mishpachas Bnei Keas Yachanu al Yerech HaMishkan Teimon. If you remember, I told you Kehos sits in the inner square of Machane Kehuno / Leviah, which was in the middle of the Machanos. They were sitting Teimon in the Tzadorim. V'nesi beis ov l'mishpachas hakehosi elitzofim ben Uziel. The Nasi of the Beis Hav, the Mishpachas HaKehosi, not for Shevet Levi, but the Mishpachas HaKehosi, which are responsible of Klei HaMikdash, Umishmartom, HaOrin, HaShulchan, HaMineiro, HaMizbechois, VeKlei HaKodesh, HaYishosu B'hem, VeHamosach VeKol Avedos. So it says specifically and precisely. The Bnei Kehos are the one who is the Nasi is a Litzofan, and the Litzofon, Mishmartom, the job, the duties is Orein Shulchan Menorah, Mizbechos, Klei HaKodesh, and Kol Avedos. And then the next pasuk, Vekilo Aaron Lebonav L'Chases HaKodesh, Vekol Klei HaKodesh, B'nisoya Oren V'achen Yavo Bnei Keos, Losas V'lo Yigor LaKodesh Umeis Elo Masas Bnei Kehas Be'oil Moed. The masa of the Mishkan, of the Klei Mishkan, is Bnei Kehos. Later on in Parshas Ba'alo Yisro, it says Befeish V'nosu HaKehasim Noisei HaMikdash Ve'ekimu Es HaMishkan Ad Boyom. What is Noisei HaMikdash? It's not Mikdash. The Gemara says Mishkan Ikra Mikdash and Mikdash Ikra Mishkan. And the Gemara wants to bring a raya from here that the Mishkan is called Mikdash because the Maisa the Ad Yimei Shleimah there was no Beis HaMikdash. And it says over here, Noisei HaMikdash Kehos. Apparently, the Mishkan is also called Mikdash. Al Kaponim. If I look in the Torah very clearly and precisely, Shtei Toch Klor, that the Masa of Bnei Kehos was Klei Mishkan, and the first Kli which it belongs to Bnei Kehos is the Orin. And then it goes the Shulchan, the Mizbech, but the first Masa of Bnei Kehos, Shtei Klor in the Torah Beferish, goes to Bnei Kehos. In our pasuk, it says who is carrying the Aron Bris. Vayomer Yeshua el HaKohanim seu es Aron Bris. Here, for some reason or another, we never had the Kohanim participate. I mean, the Kohanim are also sons, Aaron HaKohen, and the children of Aaron HaKohen. They're also sons of Amram, who is also a son of Kehos. They're not deprived from being Tzetzoim of Kehos. But over here in the pasuk, it says that even though in the Torah state that the Ale Klei Mishkan, inclusive but not limited, the Orein belongs to all the Tzetzoim of Kehos, here for some reason or another, Kadosh Baruch Hu tells Aaron, the Tzetzoim of Aaron, only Bnei Aaron HaKoyanim Abinoi said the Orein by crossing Yericho. That's number one. A second time where we find that the Masa Orin was given only to Bnei Aaron Ubanov. Aaron was not alive anymore. He was nifter in Rosh Chodesh Av 9 months ago. He's not around. But upon his children, Elazar, Pinchas, they're all with them going into Eretz Yisrael. Elazar HaKohen was throughout the whole Mishkan Shiloh. Elazar HaKohen, he was nifter. Then Pinchas was there for many years later on. Malkoponim, the Tzetzoim of Aaron and the Tzetzoim of Elazar, of Pinchas, they're the one who have to carry the Orein in 3 places. In going into Eretz Yisrael, crossing the Yarden, in Milchemes Yericho, like we just read before in Perek Vov, and when the Orein is going in Achnosos or Orein to Beis Hamikdash, she'oso shleima in Sefer Melachim, right? The question is, it doesn't really say that the Kohanim, since it's given, the Masa Mikdash is given to all of Bnei Kehos, all the Tzetzoim of Kehos, Manishtano, why is over here in this particular three places, Dafka, the Bnei Kehosa Levim are not able, and it goes not the only one who could able and is mitzuveh and the Nesias Aaron is the Kohen. In order to understand it, I want to read with you Ashtika Gemara in Masechet Saita. In the state in the Gemara in Saita in the Aflamet Gimel, I would like to read a brayse in Tona Rabbanon. Keitzad Ovri Sol Sayad B'chol Yoim Oren Isachrei Shnei Golim Vayom Nosei Atchilo. That's what we read just before. Every day, this Oren, we're talking about the Oren Shos Betzal, the real Oren, the Oren Shel Zov, was B'toich HaMachne Shchine, V'hayoim Nosei Atchilo Sheneemar, Hine Aroin Abris Adon Kol Oretz Eiv Lifneichem. That's number one. B'chol Yoim V'yoim Levim Noisim Es Oren. V'hayoim Nesou Koyanim, Sheneemar V'hoyo Kenoyach Kapois Raglei HaKoyanim Noisei Aroin Hashem. It says, B'chol Yoim V'yoim, we know, throughout the whole Midbar, every time when they walked 40 years in the Midbar, from the time they put up the Mishkan until 39 years, in the second year they put up the Mishkan, until coming into Eretz Yisrael, who had the Masa Oren was together with all the Shar Klei HaMikdash, which is given to all the Tzetzoim of Kehos. Kayrach is in the business, Chevron, the Lot, Tzitzofa, Mishoel, everyone is included. The Hayoim, this specific day, Nesou Kohanim. So it's very clear that in the day of crossing the Yarden, Psukim Mefuroshim, that here was the entire Tzetzoim of Kehos were deprived, they're not allowed to carry the Oren, and the only one who's allowed to carry the Oren is really the Kohanim. Tanya Rabbi Yosef b'shleish mekoyim nosu Kohanim esaron kshoves hayadu shesiv b'vricho ukshechziru limekoymoi. So these are the three things. Rashi comes along and says, we don't have too much time. Rashi says, Rashi in Saita, b'mei shlem lebeis kodesh hakadoshim sheneema vayavoy kol ziknei Yisrael vayisos hakoyanim esaron v'hayin echziru limekoymoi kshehiglo b'mei Eli mitoich beis kodesh hakadoshim shel mishkan she'oso Moshe misham nutal she'amishkan nikba b'shiloi וכשחזרו פלישתים לא היו למוקם קבוע של חורב משכן שילוי ונשתר בבייס אבינודוב ומשם הביאו דוד לסוף 20 שנה לבייס עובד אדוים ומשם לעיר דוד עד שבונו שלמס בייס המקדש ובונו לא ידביר לפנים מן האיכול ועמו טרקס לחצץ במקום הפרויכס והוא קורא במקום המיוחלוי כדכסיב ויביאו הכהנים ושרי בריס השם על מקום על דביר הבייס. So Rashi says a whole shtickle Torah that the Oren went to Golus from Mishkan Shiloi, and then he was sitting in the Golus by the Plishtim. When the Plishtim came and they returned it was a ganze Maisa, Plishtim returned it, there was no more Mishkan Shiloi, so it was in Beis Avinodov, and from there David took it after 20 years to Oved Edoim Hagiti. He parked there and he sat there in Ir David until Shlomo built the Beis Hamikdash, and then they brought it in. And then, when the final bringing into the Kodesh HaKadoshim Beis Hamikdash, Shlomo, then it says, "Ve'yoviu koyanim esaroim bris Hashem el mekoymoi el dvir habayis." As I state in Rashi, Radak says, we don't have too much of a time. Radak says, "Ve'koyanim ve'alev kiroischem esaroim bris Hashem," and our pasuk right here, kiroischem esaroim bris Hashem ve'koyanim v'im noisim oiseh zogt der Radak, עד כאן היו הלווים נויסים מסעורן. ועתו נסעו הכהנים להקדיש היועסר מפני הנס שנעשה לפניו עתו. ואומר חכמינו ז"ל בגימל נקוביץ נוסע הכהנים מסעורן כשובס היה לשטוב ובריחו כשחזרו למקוימוי, וזה הויו כשהויו דוד ברח מפני אבשלום, שנאמר ויושב צודק ואביוסר הכהן מסעורן אלוקים ירושלים, וכל זה להגדולס קדושוסוי, ועוד מצינו במוקם אחר בבניין הבייס, שאלו הכהנים מעיר דוד והביאו לבייס קודש הקדושים, ואפשר כי לפני שנשנו במקומו ישום לעולם, למונו לשורש מקומס אלה, ובכלל שהחזרו למקומו. The Radak is mistapek. We know the three mekomes are crossing the Yarden, Siv of Yericho, and going in. The Radak has a tzad to say that Echziru Limkoimo doesn't mean Echziru Limkoimo in the time they finally parked it, but it doesn't count, for some reason or another, he doesn't count. He said three mekoimes. Echziru Limkoimo was when they took it back, when David ran away from Avshalom, they took it back from the Philistine. And also when they brought him to Kodesh HaKadoshim, the reason why it doesn't count as an extra time, a fourth time, because it's all included. So the Radak is a little bit vakeltzach if the Chzirul Imkoime goes on the Chzirul Imkoime when they take it from Plishtim, and when David ran Mipnei Avshalom, and then Tzadok and Evyoser brought the Oren to Yerushalayim, or we're talking about the final destination, the parking where they brought it to Beis HaMikdash. The Rambam Sefer HaMitzvah says as follows: Hu shetzivonu sheyisu hakoyahanim ha'oren al ksefeim shenirtzu loses oisu mimokim l'mokim v'hu amor yisalu ka'avodas hakodesh alem b'kosav yiso ve'av shezeh atzivui bolu levim. The Rambam says the mitzvahs nesiyas ha'oren is given to koyahanim. Ve'af al pi, I'm reading Loshen Rambam, shezeh atzivui bolu levim bo'esoi omnam hu yozel lemiut mispar koyahanim b'zman hazeh b'zman hahu ki Aaron hu haroish. אומנם לדוירס חייבים במצווה זה הכהנים והם יישאו כמו שיסבור בספר יהושע בספר שמואל. Pelvic Rambam. Rambam says really the mitzvah to see us on is bestowed upon the kohanim. No, as everything nicht gewenke kohanim, it's hard to carry the on. Who was there? 2 kids. Not of Avihu die, only a Lazar and Isomer. The miut kohanim. So therefore they asked the Levim to join to stecken a pleize, zuzustellen to help him out. In וכשציווה דוד לא עושה סוהרון בפעם השני שאום בדבריום וייסו בני הלווים וסוהרון הלווים כאשר ציווה מוישה בידבו בכסייס במויטס עליהם וכן שזוכר בדברי היום חלוקס הקריין ל-24 משמורס ואומר אחר זה אלו פקודוסם לעבודוסם כמשפוטם בידם ונביאים ביר החכום משוז רואים אז ליוס עבודס הקריין לא עושה סוהרון על הכוסף וזהו כאשר ציווה השם אלוקי ישראל ויור ולושן ספרי כמשפוטם כאשר איכון ציוו לבני כאוס להינוסר כעבודת הקודש עליהם בכוסף יסו. Comes along the Ramban and Shreit Chai V'Kayim. The Ramban is in Asogos in Shirish Gimel in Sefer HaMitzvahs, and I'm reading. לפי דעתי שגם זה שאומר שנעתקו המצווה לכהנים אינו אמס חלילו. שנאמר שתשתנה שום מצווה בתורה שיהיו הלווים נפסולים ממס האורן לאילום. The Rambam says, remember, it's given to Kohanim. And there were very little amount of Kohanim, so they gave it to the Levim. But once the Kohanim were a Pov of there was a big crowd of Kohanim, they took it away from the Levim and give it back to the Kohanim. Zog the Ramban, Chalilo, Shenoimar, Shetishtane, Shumitza, B'Torah, Shu Alevim, Nifsolim, Masor, Loilum, V'Alevim, Nesau, B'mei David, Gampam, Hasheni, Shos, HaKoigen. V'Ksiv, וכל הלווים הנויסים מסורים והמשרים, אבל נאמר, זוג דה רמב"ם, כי הכהנים והלווים כולם כשרים במעשה מן התורה, שכולם נקרא לווים. ואם תאמר שאומרו זה גם על הכוסף השני רוצים לא יאמר, שגם בני אהרון בכלל מצווי הסוהר שנאמר בבני כרך עבודת הקודש עליהם ובבני כוס איכולוס כולם. אבל כמשפוטם באהרון במשמורת נאמר ולא במעשה אהרון. Ramban says everyone is kosher. Side the kohanim, inside the Levim, everyone is. Chalila to say that the Esko, the mitzvah, were taken away from the Kohanim, given to the Levim. Lemaise, from the time Hukam HaMishkan until they came to Beis HaMikdash, was the mitzvah given to Shevet Levi. But if I look in Sefer Yehosha, once they came to Yerushalayim, state, Ki Omar David iniach Hashem la'amoi, vayishkem b'Yerushalayim, v'gam Levim ein loses es HaMishkan v'skol avedosum. The ganze tzivui from the Siyas HaMishkan was expired. Mitzad Sheni, if you look in Parashas Eikev Ba'esai, Yivdil Hashem es Shevet Alevi Loses Saroim Bris Hashem L'Shorasu Levorach Hashem. What's L'Shorasoi? Zok the Targum Unkelus Lematl de Aaron Kayomo Ulevorach Nesias Oren is a mitzvah the Kohanim Ada Yoim Hazeh. L'chur it's a steer. Zok the Bris Karov in Sefer. But be'emes there are 2 separate mitzvahs. There's a mitzvah of Nesias Klei HaMishkan, which is given to all of Bnei Levi, and there is a mitzvah of Nesias Oren as a separate entity which is given only to the Kohanim. When you carry the Oren as an integral part of Nesias HaMishkan, then the Oren is a part of Klei HaMishkan. And therefore the Levim, even though not Bnei Oren, is Noisim. That's the Psukim in the Torah that says that Bnei Levi is Noisei Oren, because the Oren, the Shulchan, the Mishulchan, the Mizbeach, all of them are Klei HaMishkan. But when you carry the Oren Levadoi, it's a separate din of Nesias Oren. And that's the Psukim in Yeshua and Melochim that Bnei Aaron carried it, because then they carried the Oren B'Teres Nesias Oren and not B'Teres Therefore the Rambam is not talking about the mitzvah of Nesias Oren on Klei. The Rambam is talking about not the mitzvah of Nesias Oren as part of Klei HaMishkan. The Rambam says, it's a mitzvah of carrying the Oren by itself, and that's not given to Kayanim. And that's a mitzvah which is said l'doros. It's not only, even after the Masa Mikdash was bottled, there is a mitzvah of Nesias Oren. That's why the Rambam only brings the din of Nesias Oren and not the din of Nesias Klei Mishkan, because Lemaisa, the Rambam Shita is that something which is not Noeg Lo'ased Lovoi is not Ne'emar till. Therefore, now we understand the Gemara. The Gemara says that the Oren wasn't Oimed Lifnei Achrei Golim, but Lifnei Amachne. And the Kohanim, when they say it's two separate, it's mamish, zwei Sachen,